I'm Dr. Larry Burke, and I should warn you that this video could be hazardous to your worldview. In fact, you may start finding mysterious coins in unusual locations, deposited there by deceased relatives. That's what happened to me in 2003 after listening to Fred Zimmerman's talk on Pennies from Heaven at the Rhine Research Center. This is the 12th video in my monthly blog series for LetMagicHappen.com. That actually is a synchronicity, since this is the 12th month of 2012, just a few days before the 12/21/12 winter solstice predicted in the Mayan calendar as the shift from the Iron Age into the Golden Age according to the cycle of the Yugas. Synchronicities are described in my accompanying Let Magic Happen newsletter this month. In the blog, I've excerpted a few of Fred Zimmerman's stories from Chapter 8 of Let Magic Happen, Adventures in Healing of a Holistic Radiologist. After hearing Fred's stories, I realized I'd never had that form of after-death communication. So I went into my stress management class at Duke the next day and repeated some of the stories to the students, mentioning that I'd had after-death communications from my dad since he died in 1994. One of the students came up afterwards and said, well, his dad had also died prematurely in 1994. And at that moment I looked behind me and on the mat in the wrestling room, which is cleaned every night and usually has no coins around, there was a shiny dime. I picked up the dime and said, imagine what date is on this dime. And of course it was a 1994 dime. And he was pretty blown away by that, and I gave him the coin and said, you may need this in your future work as a pastor in counseling bereaved clients and parishioners. So he was intrigued by that. My next experience with coins from heaven actually turned out to be another dime. I went to a meeting in Chicago and flew in late on a Friday night, preparing to give a talk the next day, and thought I'd gotten in too late to attend any of the Friday evening lectures. However, after I checked in at the desk in the lobby, I looked down and found a shiny dime right at my feet. Picked it up, and of course it was a 1994. I felt like my dad was guiding me to change my plans, and I decided instead of going to my room, I'd go down the hall to the lecture room. And sure enough, they were just starting a lecture. They'd been delayed in getting the whole conference started, and the lecture was by a physicist talking about some important metallurgical discoveries. Of course, my dad was a physicist and a metallurgist, so I figured this was the talk he wanted me to hear, and it was a paradigm shifting experience for me. I finally found a penny quite a few years later, actually just a couple months ago, when I went to give a talk at the Yoga Research Society in Philadelphia. I got in early on a Friday, realized I had extra time to spend, and called my friend Donna Smith from Jefferson to see what she was up to. She said, oh, she was helping to coordinate the Mind, Body, Spirit Expo in downtown Philadelphia and invited me to come. She also said that if I came, she would get me a ticket to come to the reception and meet Michael and Ricky Beckwith from the movie The Secret. I thought, sounds like a great idea. But she said first I needed to go to the Roman Catholic Chapel of Divine Love on 22nd and Green Street in Philadelphia and meditate, because she had been there that morning with the Beckwiths, and it had been a really powerful experience. I'd never been there before, never even heard of it, but knew it was a short subway ride from my hotel. So I went down to the subway stop, asked the clerk, whose name happened to be Larry, how much it would cost for three tokens, because I needed one to go to the chapel, one to come back to the hotel, and then another one to go downtown to the football stadium where they're having the Mind, Body, Spirit Expo. he said, just put $5 in the machine, you'll get some silver change out along with your 3 tokens. And here the tokens look like a coin but have a brown stripe on them. I hope you can see that. Brown stripe on both sides. I got my 3 tokens and my handful of change, put them in my pocket, put 1 token in the subway station to get on the train, rode to the Chapel of Divine Love, went inside, and it was a very quiet sanctuary with just a few people in there and a couple nuns dressed in pink and white in the front praying. I noticed on the way in that it was All Souls Day, November 2nd. So I sat in the pew and said some prayers and thought about my dad. After a little while, the nuns in some obscure corner of the chapel started doing Gregorian chanting, and it created a very surreal atmosphere. I finished my prayers, they finished their chant, and I walked out the back of the chapel, and on the way out I noticed a plaque to St. Catherine Drexel, who was one of the members of the Drexel family who funded Drexel University and one of the first American women to be proclaimed a saint. Thought that was interesting synchronicity as I walked out the back of the chapel. Went to the subway, deposited my 2nd token, and rode back to the hotel to change. When I got back to the hotel, I changed pants, switched my change in my pocket into the other pants, and checked to make sure my token was still there, and it was gone. My token was nowhere to be seen. Instead, there was a dirty brown penny in my pocket, and I'd only had silver change in my pocket when I started out. And I couldn't even read the date until I rubbed it off, rubbed some of the dirt off, and discovered it, of course, was in 1994. Then I was left to ponder, okay, who had switched my token for the penny? Was it my dad, or perhaps St. Catherine Drexel had intervened on our behalf? At any rate, I went back down to the subway station, saw Larry the clerk again, told him what had happened, said I needed to buy another token. And so he sold me a package of 2 this time, and I have 1 left over. The other one I used to ride down to the Mind Body Spirit Expo. Just before I got on the subway, I noticed he was wearing a baseball hat. And I thought, well, it's not a Philadelphia Eagle or a Philadelphia Philly hat. It had a fleur-de-lis on it, and I realized it was a New Orleans Saints hat. So St. Larry had also helped facilitate this whole process. So I got on the subway, went down to the Mind Body Spirit Expo, met Donna and the Beckwiths, and shared this story with them. So, Pennies from Heaven are just one of many different types of after-death communication described in Chapter 8 of Let Magic Happen, Adventures in Healing of the Holistic Radiologist. I wish you an after-death communication experience of your own, and one of the types is seeing a rainbow at a synchronistic moment. That's why there's one on the cover of the book. So may you find the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow as we usher in the golden age. And if not a pot of gold, at least some pennies from heaven. So, let magic happen. Thanks.